Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host. I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. Before we get stuck in to today's episode, I want to remind everybody who's watching to go into the comments, whether you're actually the live chat replay on YouTube's live chat at YouTube, comments on LinkedIn and in Facebook, and give me a quick shout out. Let me know where in the world you're connecting from today. I'll get that shout out up on the screen. Also, if you have any comments, you can put them in there. Questions, you can put them in there, because today's episode is the October News Roundup and AMA, Ask Me Anything About Cocoa and Chocolate. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask, might not be related to news or something like that, go ahead, put it into the comments. We'll get it up on the screen. I will get it up on screen, and I will do my best to answer it. And if not, it could become a post on The Chocolate Life, or it could become an episode, an Ask the Chocolate Life episode here on The Chocolate Life Live in a future episode. So that's what I want to say. I also want to remind before we begin that today's sponsors, right, are the members of The Chocolate Life. And if you are not currently a member, you can go to TheChocolateLife.com and go and subscribe. There's always a free membership, but there is, in fact, I don't do Patreon. I'm not doing advertising. I'm not doing anything else to support the work that I'm doing here on The Chocolate Life Live. So becoming a member supports the work that I'm doing there. And with that, let's go. And it's interesting. I can see it on my end. I don't know if you see it on your end, but there's a little flash as I move around. And I am using the new portrait mode capabilities on the camera that are a part of macOS Sonoma, the new version of the operating system. And so if there's a flash, I think it's coming from something between StreamYard or something between the browser I'm using, Arc, and what's going on with the new camera controls. I haven't been able to figure it out. I was on a long Zoom call yesterday and a Google Meet call, and I didn't notice them there, but maybe it could be something to do with Streamer. Anyway, we'll figure it out and we'll go forward. Anyway, so this is the homepage of The Chocolate Life right now. So you can go there, you can see what it is that's going on. There's a complete list of all of the posts that I've done in the last 18 or 20 some odd posts that have been done. And for every single one of these live streams, I create a post on its own. And this is the post for today's live stream episode. Link to YouTube, link to LinkedIn, link to Facebook, a link to the channel on YouTube, then a quick episode overview, and then there's, for the news and AMA, a list of highlights, the things that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next hour. And I'm just going to get stuck into it. The first thing I want to let everybody know is that October 15th is the last day to purchase a tasting kit for the upcoming 2023 Craft Chocolate Challenge online virtual tasting. So you can go to this page on The Chocolate Life. You can learn more about the tasting. If you are a Chocolate Life member, there is no link on the page to go purchase, but just send me a quick email, member.support@thechocolateLife.com. And what I will do is I will send you a link to purchase a tasting kit. There's an incentive if you're a member, even a free member. What you can do is there's a $25 discount on the tasting. It's happening on Sunday, November 12th. Don't have a time yet in the day. It'll be split between West Coast and East Coast, mutually inconvenient for everyone involved. But this is coming up soon, and there's only another roughly 10 days in order to be able to order a tasting kit. So I just wanted to let everybody know. You can go to this page. You can find out there were 12 winners from 9 different companies, and we'll give you an idea about who these are. It's going to be a really, really interesting tasting. I know that Dustin Cornett, who runs the challenge, is going to be online live with me as we do the tasting, and we'll see if we can get any of the other makers involved as well. But it's gonna be fun. I did something like this for the 20th anniversary of the Chocolate Life tasting back in 2021. Had about 20 people all over the United States. And we've opened this up. If you're in Canada and you want a tasting kit, anywhere in the US and Canada will send you a tasting kit. Anyway, so do that. And again, if you're a member, member.support@thechocolateLife.com. We'll do that. I'm also sending out the member newsletter in the next day or so, and there'll be a link in the member newsletter so that people can go and purchase the kits. So just a real quick update on that. I thought it was really important. The other thing is people may or may not know that what I do is I try to maintain an events and holidays calendar on the Chocolate Life. So you can click on this link and through the magic of programming, I'm straight to the October listing. And so here's a list of conferences and festivals and things that are going on over the course of over the month of October. So this weekend, I mean, right now, if Seattle in an hour or two, we'll have the start of the Northwest Chocolate Festival. Starts tomorrow. The unconference ends today. Next week, we have Euro Chocolate, which is happening at the Umbria Fiere in Italy. The following weekend is Chocolate Portugal, which is going on in Porto. I was there last year. It's a fabulous location. If you've never been to Porto, you need to go to Porto. You need to get the local delicacy, the dessert, which I will remember before the end of the hour. I don't remember it right now. But you have to go there for the food, especially the bacalhau. And the World of Wine, which is where Chocolate Portugal is, it takes place. This is really fabulous. And so there's a link to the festival website. Now, between Chocolate Portugal and the Salon de Chocolat, which is happening in Paris, I'm going to be in London for the International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum, which is being organized by International Cocoa Diplomacy. And that's a brand new thing. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Not a whole lot, because I am going to dedicate this coming Tuesday's live stream to, yes, Catherine, pastéis de nata. Thank you very much. You can't go anywhere in Lisbon or Porto without getting a pastéis de nata. So here, let's do that, Catherine. Thanks for that. Let's go here. Absolutely. They're fabulous. It's an egg custard in a little tart shell. It sounds simple. Like many things, it can be done well, it can be done poorly. And so I really recommend going and having some pastéis de nata. I'm just thinking about it. I'm actually talking with a chocolate maker, actually Nicolo Corallo. Nicolo was a guest on a previous live stream. I've been talking with Nicolo, who runs a coffee shop. If anybody goes to Lisbon, they can go to the Bairro Alto. They can go to Nicky's coffee shop. He's working in chocolate. Obviously, for people who may know, Claudio Corallo is his father. He has a connection to cocoa in Sao Tome and Principe. And we're talking about doing some interesting things with some Portuguese foods that are not normally connected with chocolate. And so hopefully we'll get it. I'll get a chance to be in Portugal very soon and go do that. But this is the events calendar. It's there. What I want everybody to know is that there is a link. So if you go to the bottom and you're a member, you can go and add festivals. So here we have Kel at Fjorden. Put a festival on the list, and I put it into the calendar. So if you have a holiday that's local to the country where you are, or some other festival, put it in there, and I will get it added up onto the list. I hit my Instagram feed. I know there are some things that I forgot for this year because I didn't know them, and I'll put them up, and we'll make sure. But the idea is to try to make sure that we have something which is reasonably complete. And one of the reasons why I do this is, if I was organizing a chocolate festival or organizing a conference, I would be very careful about the month of October. So this weekend, we not only have the Northwest Chocolate Festival in Seattle, but the group that runs the International Chocolate Salons is doing something, I think, in Los Angeles, exactly the same weekend. I don't know that the markets overlap for those two. They might. But the goal being, you shouldn't have to, when you're thinking about these things, you want to make sure you're not scheduling something right on top of something else. And so that's one of the reasons why I do it. Plus, it's just fun to know what's going on in the calendar. And so these are food-related holidays, especially chocolate food-related holidays are on the list. So you can go to October. And then what I want to talk about really quickly as well is that I was asked by the British Society of Flavorists to give a talk about chocolate. at the upcoming BSF Coffee Symposium. So it's Friday the 20th of October. It's in the Lake Como district of Italy, and I wish there was budget so that I could go to Lake Como before I went to London for the International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum. There wasn't. But I'm going to be giving this virtually, and the presentation is going to be about communicating the flavors of chocolate and coffee. And it's going to be building upon the work that I did thinking about visualizations of chocolate flavor. So I worked with the Cacao of Excellence, so Brigitte Laliberté and Ed Seguin, to take them off of spider graphs into a different kind of visualization for flavor that we all think is much, much easier to be able to interpret. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that experience and some of the challenges that are associated with visualizing flavor in coffee and chocolate. And then also about vocabulary and how we need to have different vocabulary and different visualizations for different audiences. It's really, really fascinating. And I'm hoping that it will be recorded. But what I may do is, after the symposium is over and after I get back from London, what I will do is I will present my presentation as a part of a live stream so that you guys can get an idea about what it is that I talked about and what the feedback was that I got from the audience. I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's going to be an interesting afternoon. Actually, I'm giving it like 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Central European time. Mark and your good morning to Blue Spruce Chocolate from Kittredge, Colorado. Would love to hear more about international cocoa diplomacy. That's where I'm going to go next. If you go take a look at this, this is the International Cocoa Diplomacy website. It is currently very, very much a placeholder website. But international cocoa diplomacy, one way to think about what it is that international cocoa diplomacy wants to do is it wants to be, well, so if you think about organizations like ICCO and the World Cocoa Foundation, you think about national, so there's a small craft chocolate makers association in a bunch of different countries. What they're all doing what they all may be doing is working towards the same goal, but they have different methods and different objectives of getting there. And often they appear to be in competition. And so what international cocoa diplomacy wants to do is it wants to be to some extent, the communications glue. It wants to be able to provide good data so that people are making good policy decisions, and then to build white papers and do an analysis so that other organizations will be able to communicate more effectively, and they're working towards a more unified voice. Right. And the other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we are representing every aspect of the supply chain, the value chain. So we're going to make sure that farmers are members and consumers are members, which is something that none of these other associations are currently doing. So we want to make sure that everybody who wants to have a voice can have a voice, and that we can give them the tools to make them more effective diplomats, right, when it comes to helping bring about the change that they want to see. Right, so it's really, really interesting. The meeting we're getting into next month is very, very much to some an organizational meeting at some level. We're going to be sitting down and thinking about the governance structure, the mission statement, all of those kinds of issues. And they're going to be, I think, about 100 people there, and we're going to engage all of these people in the kind of dialogue about, what can we learn from the existing institutions about what they're not doing well and what we want to be able to do well, because we really see ourselves fitting in between the gap of these smaller national organizations and these big international NGOs and quasi-governmental organizations. And so I've been spending quite a bit of time in the last little while figuring out the outline of the governance structure. So it is an NGO, so it is a nonprofit headquartered in London. It's registered internationally, not registered with the UN, we may get there. But one of the things which is going to be really interesting is we're taking this International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum concept, And without going into much more detail, we plan to be able to institute versions of this around the world, sort of like the way TED and TEDx work. We want to do something like that for cocoa, the worlds of cocoa and chocolate. So I'm really excited about all of those kinds of things. That's coming up. So that's pretty much the housekeeping aspects, things that are going on in my life that I am working on, and that will have an impact of what the Chocolate Life Live is doing, and going forward, because I'm having the second anniversary of the Chocolate Life Live um, in mid-November. It's about a month away, and I'm thinking about what year 3 looks like and how we go move forward, and how do I incorporate those things that are going on. So that's that. All right. So what I want to do is I want to go back, if I can, if you'll let me. Of course, you're going to let me because I'm running things. What I want to go back and I want to talk about a couple of things that showed up as Chocolate Life Live live streams, and provide a little bit more information around them, because I really didn't get to everything that I wanted to talk about. So the first thing is this is a post. It was only 4 days ago. It was the subject of my Tuesday live stream. There will be no more cocoa here. If people go take a look, there you can go, and here is the post. Will there be cocoa here? You can go take a look at this post, and you can find all of the links to all of the resources that I put on this. It was a really, really fascinating topic, I thought. But here's the information that you can get to. And again, don't worry about the links and trying to follow along. I know that some of these pages are very, very small and very, very difficult to read. But the idea is that the URLs, the links to each one of these pages, is in the page, and you can go back and you can look at these things. You don't need to write them down or anything like that. They are there, and I'm not putting them down in the description, but they are in the page on the Chocolate Life, which is about today's post. And I will go in a little more depth about this particular report. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about a conversation that appeared in the comments. I'm going back and forth. So there's a gentleman, right? He's the president of a UN nonprofit called ANLAC. I don't know much about them, but his response to the report from Corporate Accountability Lab was the non-interest food-based financial system and a permanent global boycott will solve many problems. And I push back on the notion of a permanent global boycott on cocoa. As far as I'm concerned, the people who are going to get hurt the most if you want to do a global boycott on cocoa are cocoa farmers. And number one, I don't see how a boycott on cocoa solves the problems. Yes, big chocolate, their sources of supply will be cut, but many of them have other business lines. So yes, their business will be hurt, but I think that ultimately the people who will be hurt the most are the cocoa farmers, and I don't think that the first place to go is to a boycott. And so we went back and forth, and he says, rather than be robbed, keep the cocoa in Africa and keep the fiat money and riba. So fiat money, we might think of it as paper dollars, just a way to think about it. It's money which is not tied to a standard like gold, right? And the value of gold determines how much money there is in situation. Riba is, from what I understand, an Arabic term, which is more or less synonymous with fiat money. And one of the challenges with that, and this is something that His Majesty the Oloni of Ethiopia, Oni, who is the founder of International Cocoa Diplomacy, and I talked about earlier this week, was that we need to think about the culture of consumption, right? So in the Ivory Coast and Ghana, there is no real culture of consumption of cocoa and chocolate. There's no, like we have a challenge associated with chocolate appreciation and connoisseurship in many places around the world. I mean, cocoa has historically been seen just as an export agricultural commodity. And the individual smallholder farmer doesn't know much more about that. And than that, they can get money if they grow this product. And there's government support. for growing the product. But they don't actually have a culture of keeping some of the cocoa to themselves, and making products locally. And as a matter of fact, in Ghana, that's illegal. I mean, the farmer is required to sell it to CocoBod and then buy it back from CocoBod if they want to do something with it, legally. I don't know how much trouble they're going to get into. But for example, if I am a chocolatier, a chocolate maker, and I have a cocoa farm, I literally need to sell my cocoa beans to CocoBod and then buy the beans from CocoBod. I just can't keep them to myself unless I'm able to create a very a special arrangement. Um, Maybe I can be a licensed buying company. I mean, there's lots of rules and regulations. It's not as simple as shipping bags of cocoa from my farms to my factory. So when we think about this, right, we start getting into, what is the cycle of exploitation? Does the cycle of exploitation of farmers everywhere in the world, but let's focus on Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana because that's what this report is. Does the cycle of exploitation end when the cocoa beans leave the country, right? Or does the cycle of exploitation end when the finished products are imported back into the country? So, and I think that we need to think about the entire life cycle there, and what that means to how we think about things. And this is a really interesting. I think. Let me know if you think it's interesting. Does the cycle of exploitation end when the agricultural commodity leaves the producing country, or do we need to consider how much the how much more in value the cocoa has appreciated when I'm purchasing the finished products, and and the farmer is not participating in any of that value chain, right? So if I'm buying imported chocolate, I want to buy a Snickers bar, or Cadbury Dairy Milk or something like that in Ghana or Ivory Coast. It's probably not manufactured in country. The beans are exported and they're imported. The finished product is imported back in, and now I'm paying for something and not participating in the value add. And so thinking about that, I think, is really, really interesting and really, really important. And it also, I think, begins to have an impact on what it is that we mean when we talk about poverty. So what does poverty mean? Most of the definitions around poverty have to do with how much money the farmer has in their pocket, right? But it really, I think it more has to do, when we think about living income and things like that, which I don't like as a concept, it more has to do with how much disposable income do I have, right? And it turns out that if there is a social safety net, whether it is societal and cultural, right, or whether or not there is government support, living income is not 100% based upon the dollars that are put into my pocket. So we're going to think about that on Tuesday for the next episode of the Chocolate Life Live. Anyway, so these are the things that are going through my head as I'm going through this. And then Mr. Ford says, grow olive trees, right? They live and produce for over 7,000 years each in the Silicon Age. All right. And my first thought was, can you even grow olives in Ghana? It turns out that it's probably possible. You can grow olives in Uganda. If you can grow olives in Uganda, then you can grow olives in parts of Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. But the questions I have is, number one is, how much would it cost to replant, 1,000 hectares of cocoa into 1,000 hectares of olives? What do I need in the way of post-harvest processing infrastructure? And I know that I can do small-scale fermentation on the farm. Can I do small-scale olive processing on the farm? I don't know that I can. So there are lots of questions that I have around that. And then this particular person is against external aid and fiat money, and he thinks that taking money involves undue influence. And so you point to what USAID has done in Peru in terms of converting cocoa farmers into cocoa farmers, the amount of money and the amount of time required to do this. This is not an overnight kind of thing. And Peru doesn't have a huge culture of chocolate consumption, not the way Colombia does anyway, and not the way Brazil does for example. And so, the question becomes, in this particular case, if I were to replace 100,000 hectares of cocoa with 100,000 acres of olives, and then keep all of the olives within Ghana, is there a market to consume all of those olive products? And I don't know the answer to that question. But if what we're trying to do is to keep the fiat money out, right, and keep the cocoa or olives in the country, it's not. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be considered in order to say, is this a viable kind of topic? Anyway, I don't know how much more of this I'm going to continue with this person, but I think that it's an interesting conversation to have. I am very, very much a believer is you can't be against something without being for a plausible and viable replacement. So you can't just say, I'm against nuclear energy. I believe you just can't just say, I'm against nuclear energy without saying, I am for, right, a viable, plausible replacement for it. And we need to think through what that means, at all levels, economically and societally. What is it going to do, right? And so, is there a mix of alternative energy strategies that would replace nuclear energy? I would say, is nuclear better than coal? There are certainly some forms of nuclear energy that are safer and less expensive than other forms of nuclear energy. So it's a very, very complex kind of back and forth that we need to go into. And it's easy to just say olives because they last 7,000 years and don't let fiat money come into the country, keep it out of the country. But the question becomes, we now have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of cocoa farmers and their families, right? So if we have 1 million cocoa farmers, it's somewhere between around 7 million, right? In West Africa, the average size of families is between 6 and 8 people in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana in the farming sector. And so how do we make this work for them? It's not, and so far, I don't see it, any kind of plausible mechanism to, let's replace cocoa with olives in this particular case, or let's replace cocoa with cocoa. I was speaking with a gentleman from USAID who was in part responsible for the program in Peru, and they realized that after they were very, very successful in, converting 10,000 hectares of cocoa farms into cocoa farms, that they had never thought about who's going to buy the cocoa. Nobody in the world market knew that all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's this, 15, 20,000 metric tons of cocoa that wasn't available before we did this work. And we need to be thinking about all those consequences. And so the success of Peru as an origin right now is in part because USAID got together with the Ministry of Agriculture in Peru, Minagri. They also worked with PROM Peru, which is the export promotion agency. They worked with DeVida, which is the government ministry around health and anti-drugs. I believe at least it was in 2014, 2013 when I was there. And they did a licensing deal with Event International, the organizers of the Salon du Chocolat. They got Gaston Acurio and Astrid Gucha, who were the organizers of this big food festival in Mistura. And they were able to create something very, very quickly that brought attention to Peru as a serious cocoa producer. And something like that would need to happen if we're going to try to convert any amount of cocoa farming into some other agricultural commodity. Keeping in mind, really important, ask the question. I'll ask the question, I'll come back to it. Number one, anybody who's watching is, when you're exporting cocoa, what are you exporting? Right? Now, this is not maybe it's a trick question, right? But when you're exporting cocoa, right, stepping back and thinking of it outside an agricultural commodity, what are you exporting? So let me see if I can do. Can I post? I'm not going to post a comment. It makes no sense because not everybody can see it. But interesting question. And if you'd like to answer it, go into the live chat in YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, go into the comments. Let us know where you're connecting from, what part of the world you're connecting from, if you have a comment, if you have a question, because interrupt at any time with a question, because it's not just news. This is all about AMA. And so, quick shout out to Mike King at Encore Coffee Company. Hello from Kansas City. It's a roasting day. Hey, Mike, every day is a good day to be roasting. The smell of roasting cocoa is one of my, well, the smell of roasting coffee too. One of my favorite aromas in the world. And I got your email, Mike. We are going to go ahead, no matter how many people are involved, but I'll reply to. So this is the tasting on November 12th. So we're going to go ahead with it. I'll give you an idea about roughly where I think the number of bars are that we're going to need based on the current level of signups. I'll get that to you this afternoon. All right. So for people who are again continuing following, here is the link to the Corporate Accountability Lab homepage, and you can download the "Will There Be No More Cocoa" here from that page. I have also provided a link, a direct link here on the "Will There Be Cocoa Here" page on the post on the Chocolate Life. So. Which is linked to here, trying to do all of the, I'll put all the threads together. One of the things that came to me, came into my feed after the live stream was this: farmers plant more cocoa outside Africa as prices rally. And we'll get to the pricing issue in just a moment. But this has to do a lot with what Corporate Accountability Lab is saying in their report. Because one of the things they said is that cocoa companies, the buyers and traders, must pay a lot more for their cocoa, like triple the current farm gate price. Right? And I think it's really important that we focus on farm gate price rather than the market price, because we're concerned with what farmers earn, not necessarily what the traders and chocolate makers and investors and speculators pay. Right. But one of the things that this article points out, and Joy Online, I don't necessarily know how reputable the source is. I haven't done that, and maybe this is an example of confirmation bias. And then I'm putting it up here. You read it, you decide, you help me figure it out. But one of the things that they're saying is that there are big programs in South America. And this one particularly talks about one in Brazil, in the state of Bahia. And Bahia is one of the two largest producing states, the other one being Pará, in Brazil. But they're talking about converting Brazil into a net exporter of cocoa. Right now, they don't produce enough cocoa for their internal needs, and they only export maybe under 1,000 metric tons. It's a really small amount of cocoa that they export, and it's all quote unquote cacao fino. And the only country that you can now legally import cocoa into, right? Because in the 1980s, it looks like witch's broom was deliberately introduced into the farms in Pará as in an act of bioterrorism against the Coronel, the landed gentry estate holder system in cocoa at the time. But they're looking to grow production to over 300,000 metric tons and to become a net exporter. And what that would mean is that they might stop importing cocoa from Ghana. And so I think what we see here, right, is that people are looking at what it is that's going on in Ghana and saying, can we reduce our reliance on West African cocoa? And is that going to be good for everyone, bad for everyone? We don't know at the moment. There's still the huge questions about deforestation, and just lots of issues that are associated with this that we need to think about it. But this is a case where, be careful what you wish for, and there's a law of unintended consequences. If you make it more expensive to produce something in some part of the world, people in other parts of the world will pay attention and say, "Ooh, me." And so, in this particular case, demanding that triple the farm gate price be paid in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, we need to think about the ripple effect. How is it going to change the market around the world, not just in Ivory Coast and Ghana? And in this particular case, it looks like there's some countries in and around Latin America that and Brazil, Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador are the three largest producers at the moment. I know there are huge plans in Colombia to grow production. It's a really interesting consequence, I think. And I didn't see that addressed in the Corporate Accountability Lab report. I may have missed it, but I didn't see it. I don't think it's in there, but something to consider. So before we continue going forward, what I want to say is, for those of you who have thought about this question, what are you exporting when you're exporting an agricultural commodity like cocoa? There are at least two things you're exporting. One of which is water. In the case of cocoa, somewhere between 6 and 7%. So for every 25-ton container, 10% would be 2.5 metric tons, roughly half of that. So you're doing somewhere between 1.5 and 2 metric tons of water, right? You're exporting. The other one is the other thing you're exporting is the nutritional content of your soil, right? And this is an aspect, I think, of the cost of exporting agricultural commodities that's not well considered when it comes to the concept of regenerative farming. So how do we make sure that the soil is healthy so that the trees continue to be healthy and productive? And not really factoring in the fact that we're exporting the nutritional content of the soil becomes a factor, I think, that we need to look at and consider more. So around this notion of will there be cocoa and the cost of cocoa at the farm gate price, I talked about the high cost of cocoa before that. Taking a look at, the fact, maybe you don't know, but taking a look at the fact that there is this notion that the current price of cocoa is at all-time highs. And it turns out that may not be the case. I mean, it might be when you think about cocoa in constant dollar terms. So it's like $3,700 a ton or $4,000 a ton now. And way back in the 1970s, it was $3,700 or $4,000 a ton then. So in constant dollar terms, it's the same, but we haven't adjusted for inflation. And so what would the cost of cocoa need to be now, right, if we in fact adjusted it for inflation? We don't. The price of cocoa now is nothing like what the price of cocoa was in 1977, if we think about it outside of constant dollar terms. So I wanted to go in and just examine this a little. And these links are not yet in the post for today's live stream. I'll put them in. But here's a link for cocoa daily prices. And one of the things which you really, really need to go pay attention to. Let's look at a little more of this. Is that in one column, we have the futures price in pounds sterlings for yesterday. This is the closing price for yesterday. We have the New York futures price in US dollars per ton, right? Then we have the daily price in US dollars per ton, right? And the daily price in euros, right? I don't think I can get the daily price in pounds sterling, which is really, really weird to me. Right? And this just sorts, right? So I can't do it. So number one, if you look at a table like this, you can't do direct comparisons except between the New York futures and the ICO daily price. And what you see that there is $21 a ton. It's not all that much. But one of the things we know about US dollars and US dollars is that there's no exchange rate, right? So I would really be interested in knowing what the relative value of 3,050 pounds sterling is compared with 37.40. And because I don't know the euro price, this frustrates me, right? Because I have to do a lot of work in order to be able to figure out exactly what it is that's going on. And I don't know if this is deliberate or not, right? But I think it certainly is an oversight. And this is one of the things that international cocoa diplomacy wants to take a look at is, can we provide good data? Because from our point of view, you can't make good policy decisions if you don't have good data, right? Because you're making assumptions that may or may not be viable. So anyway, so let's go into another organization. This is Markets Insider. And what we can do is we can go take a look at pricing, and we can go take a look at this pricing compared to what ICO reports. I mean, there's no real daily. I can get it for the last week, but there's no tabular version of this. I don't think that I can export. But it's what's interesting here is if we go take a look at some of these charts, what we can do is we can go take a look and we can look at the direction of market movement. So let's get rid of here. So if we look at what things have gone in the last week, we can see that the price is volatile from intraday trading. There's some volatility there between 3,600. That's like $70 a ton is the difference in here. But as we start moving out, we can see that this is part of a longer trend. Really important to know that the trajectory of the pricing is going down. However, if we look at the 6-month trend line, we see that it has primarily been an upward movement, with only a recent downward trend. And looking at year to date, we can see just how that's been, just how great the differential has been. In the direction and the trajectory. So this is a really, really interesting graph for me for exactly this reason, is it helps understand trajectory of the market. And then what you can do is you can go and take a look and you can say, I want this as this kind of chart, or this kind of, you can put it into the format that is easiest for you to understand. So I'm going to put this link in. And when I do each one of these AMAs, I'm going to actually be referring to these charts in the future, so we can think about historically where things are going, just understanding where the market is moving, because when it comes to chocolate, it's really important. So this is the NASDAQ chart, and it's a different way of looking at the same data, as this Markets Insider chart. And so the fundamental premise of my talk to the British Society of Flavorists is that pictures like this really heavily influence the way we think about things. I'm a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design. When I was at RISD, I had a semiotics professor in the Department of Graphic Design, a gentleman by the name of Mihai Nadine, who introduced me to the work of Edward Tufte and his wife. I am really, really sorry that I do not remember her name. Ed Tufte was at Yale University, and he wrote a book called The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, and several other books about graphic visualization and how important the right visualization is to truly understanding what it is that what's going on. So I talked about the 1 month. So here's 1 month, and we're going to try to get it into a mountain chart so they're fairly similar. So for the last month, we can see what the overall movement is. Again, here's the Markets Insider, and here's 1 month. We can see it's not quite as dramatic, and part of that is the color, and part of the way the color is shaded when it comes down here. So this changes our perception of the volatility that's in here. But again, we can take a look at a 6-month, and then a year to date, and get an idea, about where things are, and then taking a look at the volatility on any particular time. So we see that from the beginning of the year, we've got this upward slope. There have been, periods of extreme volatility, and then until recently, boom. So while we may have been at historic highs a month ago, they're now trading below historic highs. Not that this will have changed the price of chocolate. Once the manufacturers have said, let's go, and raise the price, they rarely reduce the price once they have an opportunity to increase the price. But one of the reasons why I'm presenting these three, here's a bit of tabular data. You don't get any visualization whatsoever. ICCO doesn't provide any visualization tools. But could we put this into a database and then develop visualization tools which would help us understand this? Absolutely. And so that's one of the things I want to explore And here's an example of a visualization of the data. Here's another example of the visualization of the data. And it helps us understand a little bit better um, um, short-term trends and long-term trends, which is what we're trying to do. I would like to track this against foreign exchange rates. I'd like to track this against inflation rates in different countries to understand how those three things are related. Is there any correlation in the price of sugar? So getting that data in here, really, really interesting to know. One of the things that I'm looking forward to do as part of the work that I want to do with international cocoa diplomacy is start thinking about, what is the data? What are the visualizations? What sort of analysis that we can do to help people better understand the market, the interplay of connectedness of things, and so they can help make better employment decisions, or not better employment, can help make better policy decisions, which would affect employment, right? Because if we're talking about cocoa farmers and poverty and wages and things like that, ultimately we want to make sure that the farmers are paid. Um, which brings up a point. And I had an interesting conversation with somebody earlier this week, and I mentioned the NGO that got a lot of the money for the USAID work that was done in Peru. And the motto of that NGO is business solutions to poverty. And I think that when you think about business solutions to poverty, number one, you forget, or it makes it easier to forget, that the decisions that your business decisions you're making affect people's lives, right? And when you're looking at a chart like this, or you're looking at a table like this, and you're looking at a spreadsheet like this, it's easy to forget that behind every single one of these cells, and by all of the formulas that connect all these cells together, are people. Right? And we need to remember, as we look at tables like this, and as we look at charts like this, we need to understand that this affects the lives of millions and millions and millions of people, many of whom lead subsistence level farming lives. And this kind of volatility, um, um, to some extent, the farmers are not insulated from it, right? But they have no control over it at the same time. And so we need to remember just how important it is to do that. There's one more PDF I want to put here, and I'll put the link to this. I'm going to download this and put the link to this. In last week I talked about a couple of reports that I did not see mentioned in the Corporate Accountability Lab report. So they did mention the demystifying the cocoa sector in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, which is done by the Royal Tropical Institute, but they only referenced a section of the report having to do with gender equity, and they didn't reference any of the other, I think, really, really important insights that the authors of that report were able to connect with. The authors of those reports were able to present. Now, so for example, I think this is in Ivory Coast. Why is it that many, many cocoa farming families need to borrow money against their future cocoa crop? And we can imagine that there are lots of reasons for doing that. But for many farming families, what happens is the kids go to school and school fees need to get paid. Education is not universally free, from my report told me, which I didn't know. And so they're borrowing money to pay school fees. And, that puts a different, again, behind every single one of these numbers in a spreadsheet or in a graph or something like that, there are people involved, right? And having that kind of insight, is like they're borrowing money to put their kids to school. Here in the United States, we tend to pay taxes, and our schooling is paid for in taxes unless we want to put our kids into private school. But public school, basically at no additional charge above taxes, measurements, more or less, right? Is there. And so I not referencing the ICO study, or the KIT study was one thing. The other thing they didn't do is they didn't take a look at this IISD study. And so I put a link to the 2014 and 2019 studies in the last one, and I just saw the 2022 study this morning. So just, it's very interesting reading if you are, in fact, interested in these topics, right? Because this historical connection, I've got 2014, 2019, 2022, I can look, hopefully the methodologies are the same, right? Same organization. And we can take a look at the way the data are reported, and we can get some valuable inferences around things. I'm going to download this, and I'm going to put the file into the post for today's live stream so that everybody can go take a look at it. All right. One thing that is also on my list to talk about is the new EU deforestation regulations and how the EUDR is going to have an effect on everybody who buys cocoa everywhere in the world eventually. And this question is about who is going to pay for implementing and assessing and policing the new EUDR. APAC, by the way, is Asia Pacific. And so this is going to be, I think, a really, really key aspect of the next couple of years. So as the EUDR comes in, as traceability regulations come in, as ESG regulations come in, the real question of who pays for them. And I think more importantly, if you have different companies that are doing the assessment and certification and validation, they're not using exactly the same methodologies, they're not reporting on exactly the same things. What you do is you get seams between different, so how does the EUDR mesh with ESG regulations? And if there's any ambiguity, the companies are going to try to do their best because they have a fiduciary responsibility to do so, to figure out how to game the system. And so I think that although this is just, straightforward reportage of it. Oh, by the way, in case anybody is interested in knowing, I use a browser called ARC, A-R-C. And one of the things that they did recently is they added some really interesting, capabilities. So I can now say, what is the EUDR, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to ask ChatGPT, it's going to do a summary of the content of the page, right? And let me know what the page is about. And based on what's on the page. And so I can do an in-page summary without having to leave the page and lose the context. I'm agnostic around the use of AI, but I think that this is a really, really cool application of the technology. In the find bar, which I would use. Anyway, I use it dozens of times a day. I can either choose to find a topic on the page or ask ChatGPT, in this particular case, ChatGPT a question, about the contents of the page. Really, really cool. And I can copy the summary and use it in some way if I want to. But a reason to use the ARC browser. It's very, very different from the way Chrome. It is a Chrome fork, so the underlying engine is Chrome. So all the extensions that you and all the other programs that you've uploaded to work with Chrome will work in ARC. But the whole UI UX has changed in ways that, for me, I can't imagine going back to Safari or Chrome or a Brave or Firefox or anything else. It's really, really fabulous. And now that there's this new tool, which allows me to quickly summarize the contents of a page, it's really, really cool. There are other things that it does. If I were to go to a search page, it'll automatically generate a summary of a link before I click the link. So I get more than what the search engine. Really interesting kind of capability. But as a high-level point, we're getting to this EU deforestation and what are going to be the impacts and who's going to pay for it and what does it mean for people going around. So worth taking a look at. I thought again, it's going to be really, really important. Number one, ICO is celebrating 25 years of something. I I don't know that it's a commitment to sustainable cocoa, because if they had 50 years of commitment to sustainable cocoa, cocoa would be sustainable. It's like World Cocoa Foundation has a commitment to helping reduce illegal child labor. They've had 20 years to do it, and they still haven't figured out the problem. So, but it is the 50th anniversary, and you can go figure out, this is again from News Ghana, you go figure out what ICO has to say about itself and what they said to Ghana. But it is important. Just a point of reference in the week's news. This also came through. I subscribe to about 9 industry newsletters, and I use Google Alerts. Right, so I have a bunch of Google Alerts that send me messages every day, and so these are 2 of the ways that I go stay up in the world. So this is a report from the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, U.S. Department of Labor, about child labor in Ghana, and there are bunches of links, including to the Harkin-Engel protocol. So this is a good primer in terms of primer. It's and understanding some of the historical background to this, if you want to look at it from a slightly different perspective of an NGO that is looking to address the issues and wants to promote the work of the NGO. So when we're talking about balance, right, this is a really, really important. This is one of the ways, right? Looking for different sources, comparing what it is they have to say, going and finding where the links to primary sources, really, really important. I think I mentioned, earlier, I was thinking about this particular article. It comes from My Joy Online, and it's this article about farmers planting more cocoa outside of Africa. And I'm going, to what extent did I pick this because it is associated with my confirmation bias, because My Joy Online is not necessarily what I would think of as a primary reliable source, and there aren't any links to primary sources, right? So yeah, something to consider. So go there, take it with a link, a grain of salt. Or a cocoa nib. Getting away from politics and into the world of chocolate. This is something that's relatively new. It came into my feed yesterday. So Cadbury, which is owned by Mondelez now, and Mondelez is the confectionery part of Kraft, spun off. So Cadbury is ditching production of chocolate bar after fall in demand. So it's a less sugar version of dairy milk. So it's 30% less sugar than dairy milk. And so it's really interesting that after being in the market for 4 years, it hasn't found any traction. It doesn't. Apparently, not many want a less sugar version of Cadbury dairy milk, and which flies in the face of all of the trends that trend watching companies and big manufacturers are saying, is that sugar reduction in confectionery is consumers really want. And this is an indication that it might not be. I did go take a look, and it turns out that this soluble corn fiber is what it is that is reducing the amount of sugar in it. So number one ingredient in this is still sugar, right? After that, it's milk solids. And then we go that from into cocoa solids and cocoa butter together. It's the UK, so I can add up to 5% of non-cocoa butter fats into it. So edible vegetable fat and emulsifiers less than or something like that. So it turns out soluble corn fiber might be inulin. It might be another one, but it's more likely to be inulin. Is an ingredient, but it turns out that Cadbury is not finding a whole lot of market traction for a 30% less sugar dairy milk bar. Just quick note to know. So maybe looking for less sugar versions of the same product is not as attractive to consumers as many people think. The next one is, again, this came through my feed. I love traveling to Brazil. and have been to this store called Copenhagen. It's one of the largest chains of chocolate companies that are founded in Brazil, and Nestle bought out a controlling interest in the company that owns Copenhagen. Now, you can get Copenhagen here in the United States. They have a particular marshmallow-filled something or other. So it's a marshmallow-filled something or other. It's just marshmallow covered in chocolate. Maybe it has a cracker base. Very, very common, very, very popular. In Brazil, it's available here in the United States, but very, very soon it's going to be a Nestle brand. It may be that they're already using Nestle chocolate. I believe Nestle has a processing factory in Brazil, but an example of local brands, big companies needing to expand by acquisition. And so this is one of the latest aspects of that growth. Quick shout out to Chef Jeffrey Gardner in Torrance, California, Marsata Chocolate. Good to hear from you. Hope you're keeping your cool. We're like upper 40s, low 50s overnight here. We've been getting into low 80s, but generally mid 70s during the course of the day. It's been really, really pleasant here for the last couple of weeks. I've really, really enjoyed getting out and about and walking through the countryside and doing it. Before we quit for the day, we're at an hour. Again, want to remind everybody, thank you everybody who's been watching for the hour, to go smash the like button on this video or gently press it or use your mouse and do whatever it is you need to do in order to like this video. Go and subscribe to the Chocolate Wire channel. And if you're not a member of TheChocolateLife.com, go to TheChocolateLife.com and sign up. Here's the homepage. I'm logged into my account. But if you go to the homepage and you're not a member, it will say join, and you can join. There's always a free level. And if you do become a member, even a free member, there is a $25 discount on the upcoming 2023 Craft Chocolate Challenge tasting event. We have a deadline coming up 16th of October for purchasing kits, and the tasting itself is going to be happening on the 12th of November. You can see we talked about it right here. So, hey. So you can actually click on that button after you become a member and figure it out. Even though I put a jack-o'-lantern into the featured image for today's post, haven't really talked about Halloween, right? Coming up. Halloween is a time for candy, as we all know. So if you're not a chocolate maker, right, and you're not making minis, often we think about how can I produce, given ethically sourced chocolate. So am I going to give something like, Endangered Species Chocolate Company, or maybe Tony's Chocolate Lonely, or something like that? There are concerns I have with both of those companies in terms of their ethical sourcing policies. But I was recent email correspondent with Sean Eskenazi about a number of things. And I learned through an email that they have this new mini chocolate bar line, and 4 different origins: the San Jose del Tambo in Ecuador, Zamora Amazonia, Mababu, which is in Tanzania, and Davao, which is in the Philippines. You can get these bars, get these boxes. They're not inexpensive, 90 cents something a piece, so not before shipping, not inexpensive. But if what you want to do is you want to perhaps give a very, very high quality chocolate as a part of your Halloween gifting options, right? Maybe you hand them to the adults who come with their children. Pretty cool idea. Here's the kids. Hey, mom and dad, here's something you might want to do. This might be a really, really good way. So it's a box of 150 pieces. You don't give them all away. It's a great thing for you to have and share among the members of your family and friends who are really, really interested in this. I'm gonna put a link to this page into today's live stream post, which is this one here. The Chocolate Life Live. We're looking at the October News Roundup and AMA. And it's Friday, so I hope everybody's getting ready to have a great weekend. But I want to point out that this coming Tuesday, the live stream, again, 10 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, Mountain Standard Time. At 10 o'clock, the next Tuesday's episode is going to be about the International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum in detail. and the International Cocoa Diplomacy Organization. And I am hoping that the travel spirits will conspire to make it happen. But His Majesty, the Aloni of Ethioni, um, um, Obad Dokun Thompson, is in the United States at the moment. And he'll be on the East Coast on Tuesday. And I'm hoping that he will be able to join us for some or all of that conversation, get a chance to meet with him, and we can have a conversation about what it is that we're looking to do with he's looking to do with international cocoa diplomacy, and what the goals are. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining me here today. And to remind everyone, as always, right? If you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everyone.